Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society in general. I am Father George Ehusani, and I have with me in the studio today our friend Clement Nwankwo, chairman of the Situation Room for elections in this country, right? Clem, we are welcome once again to our studio.
Thank you, Father.
You have been very busy, and your team has been very busy with elections and primaries and so on and so forth. Between the last time you came here and now, we have had the Anambra State elections, we have had the Ekiti State elections, we have had the Osun State elections, gubernatorial elections, and we have had the primaries of all the parties towards general elections. What is the situation? How much have we improved? You were the chairman of the Situation Room in 2014. How much have we improved in the conduct of primaries and actual elections between 2014 and 2018? What are the prospects? What are we likely to see from what you have seen in Ekiti, in Osun, and in all the states in the recent primaries? What are we likely to see in 2019? Have we made any significant improvement, or are we still where we were?
Father, that's a lot packed in one because we're looking at the actual elections that have preceded the primaries. Ekiti, Osun have been significant elections, and so we'll take the elections and then we'll go to the primaries.
Okay.
On the elections, I think that when Ekiti and Osun were conducted, everybody was looking towards these two elections as a major indicator for 2019. We did have the elections in Ekiti. There were challenges, but in terms of the processes of the election management body, INEC, we did see improvements.
Okay.
We did see an ability of an election management body to start elections on time, more or less.
Deliver equipment.
Deliver sensitive materials ahead of time. We did see security services play an important role, well-organized role, with respect to Ekiti. The outcome may be controversial, especially for those that didn't win the elections, but clearly in terms of the process, we did see some improvement. And I think, of course, the election process also includes adjudication and litigation. So for those who are dissatisfied with the election results, the courts are there to go forward. But that last point I made now about the courts being there to go forward is also the bane of our elections, because in a lot of instances, people feel they can abuse the electoral process, they can manipulate the electoral process, they can get themselves announced as winners, and then the
court processes may take the next 3 years.
The burden is on the person who has been announced as loser to now begin to go through the rigors of litigation, and we shouldn't get to that point. We did have Osun. Osun in a lot of ways was an improvement in Ekiti.
I see.
The processes were there. The opening of poll was quite early. But Osun had two elections. The first election, which I would be quite clear to say was very well run election, very well conducted election by the election management body. On election day, election results were announced at the end of the day, and there was a controversy. And it is from there that Osun developed its own dynamics and challenges and criticisms. A lot of people felt that the election should have been announced on the first ballot. The winner should have been announced, and they could not find justification for why the runoff elections or the rerun elections had to now be announced for 7 polling units. So that's where the challenge of Osun election emerged, and that's where we are today, looking towards 2019, because people are now exceedingly worried about the elections in 2019.
So the announcement of a candidate, the APC candidate, as winning in the Osun elections remains controversial.
I think for me the key thing is that there was an election conducted on the 22nd of September.
Yes.
INEC announced that there was an inconclusive election. The gap between the two main contenders was 350 votes. INEC announced that there was there
were irregularities in 7 polling stations or something.
Well, they announced an inconclusive election because they said that there were 7 polling units where you couldn't conclude the elections.
Okay.
Now, and they were citing Section 53 of the Electoral Act. Section 53 talks about where the margin, where there is overvoting in particular polling units, where the margin of victory is lower than the areas where there are controversies and so on. All of that language. Now, for a lot of people, going on to the runoff and seeing the same circumstances play out in the runoff, because in the runoff there was violence, there was absolute police and security abuse of the process.
I see.
There was impunity on the part of security services. I don't even blame INEC in the actual conduct of the runoff. INEC itself was a victim
of that over-policing.
It's not over-policing, abuse. Because it seemed that the police stood by or actively even participated, but I would be more cautious to say stood by and watched
irregularities take place. Intimidation take place.
Watched talks of political parties, particular political party, overrun and overwhelm the system. In that circumstance, INEC should not have announced a result. They should have fallen back to the elections of September 22nd to announce the actual result of that
Is
election.
this the position of the Situation Room at the end of the runoff elections?
What we said in our statement was that the circumstances that led to the declaration or the call for a runoff by INEC all manifested
in the
runoff. And in that circumstance, INEC should not have proceeded with announcing a winner on the basis of the runoff elections. That is the position of the Situation Room.
Your observation of the elections in Osun and in Ekiti and in Osun, you said that as far as the process is concerned, there was an improvement.
There is an improvement. There was an improvement, and I still have confidence in INEC in terms of its process. I think there are challenges. I think there are perception issues within about INEC, and INEC needs to address those perception issues in order to rebuild public confidence in INEC.
Perception about neutrality and
there is perception about neutrality, perception about specific officials or commissioners in INEC who have been mentioned, rightly or wrongly, and that's, for me, it's not about INEC saying, oh, we agree with this perception. It's for INEC to address this perception.
I see. So, what I am hearing is that objectively, INEC perhaps is improving in the processes, such as materials arriving on time, elections beginning on time, some improvement in the processes. Well, as for the outcome, there are challenges. And then also there are perceptions that some individual INEC officials were not as objective as they could have been, especially with regard to...
are regarded as partisan. And for us in Situation, we're not concerned about who wins the election. That's not our job.
Yes.
What we want, in fact, it's even in the interest of whoever wins the election that their victory is seen as having been properly won.
Yes.
Because you don't want to win an election. And we saw that with former President Yar'Adua, late Yar'Adua, that when he won the elections, or when he was announced, I wouldn't say won, when he was announced as winner of the elections in 2007, even he acknowledged
that it was not a clean process.
It was not a very good election. In fact, it was a very bad election. And that was why the committee was set up, led by Justice Muhammad Lawal Uwais, the Electoral Reform Committee, and that's why several of the positive recommendations for reform emerged, and that's why You then had a new INEC created, headed by Professor Tahiru Jega, who was also part of that committee. That committee made recommendations, and what we have seen since the beginning of the implementation of the recommendations of the Ways Committee report is an improvement in INEC's processes. So it is in the interest of either party, of the major parties or indeed any other party, to ensure that they participate in the process very fairly. And whatever it is you say of, and I have a lot of criticisms of the failures of President Jonathan, but one thing that I will continue to hold him in a high esteem for is that he did not interfere with the electoral process. He gave INEC the independence that it required. And when civil society organizations like us criticized the government, they didn't see us as opponents. President Jonathan listened to criticisms that were made. He didn't regard election observers as enemies, because we have no interest in who wins the election. What we want to see is someone win the election with credibility.
I saw the statements
and with legitimacy.
I saw the statements issued at the end of the Osun elections by your team, by CDD, by some other agencies. Do we have any reactions from government that indicates that you are an opposition group or something?
Well, we have not had any official reaction. What we have seen are insinuations.
Okay.
CDD, Situation Room, both organizations had very excellent statements. The international community had excellent statements as well. You would see that for the first time, the ambassadors of the EU, the USA, and the United Kingdom jointly addressed a press conference on their perception and observation of elections. And if everybody is saying the same thing, then you better listen.
That must be the truth.
Listen. Because if you don't listen, it would be a Pyrrhic victory.
Yes.
You must win elections, and there's nothing that says you will not win elections if things allow things to go fairly. So I think that it is in the interest of, and we have two major political parties who are running elections. We have other parties as well. But it is in the interest of the parties who are running elections to ensure that their victory is legitimate.
Is seen to be
credible.
Victory.
Yes.
Yeah, credible.
Otherwise, it would be back to crisis. It would be that your citizens would be suspicious of you. The international community would look at your victory with scorn, and the instability in the country will exacerbate.
Now, from there, from the Ekiti-Osun elections and the controversies that trail the Osun elections, now back to the issue of the primaries. I mean, we have seen from Imo to, different places, we have seen where incumbents, and it happened in Ekiti also, where incumbents publicly announced that this is my anointed candidate, and this is the person that must run, that must be your governor after me. Is that democratic?
Across all the parties, and you mentioned Ekiti, you saw what happened in Ekiti elections that was conducted in July or so, where that was July 14th, where before then, of course, the primaries in the parties did not allow for free and fair participation, whether it is the PDP or APC. It was, or even the SDP, that was quite contentious in those elections. The process did not throw up free and fair, membership driven.
Meaning the incumbent just decides that this is the person I want.
Decides, and what is sad about an incumbent deciding is the use of state resources to push through their agenda. And now the recent primaries. The most disgraceful of the recent primaries was what was going on in Imo State. First of all, primaries were conducted in Imo, and you saw the ward congresses and party congresses were conducted. They had to be rerun. In Imo, in one of the parties, the governor had his son-in-law.
Yes.
He had his brother-in-law.
Oh,
both
in addition
of them,
to son-in-law.
in addition, running for the primaries. His son-in-law came first, his brother-in-law came second.
Is it a family affair?
And of course, he took a seat in one of the primaries. So Imo is a typical example of the gross abuse of elections in this country, of the shame of the primaries.
Unbelievable.
And why we are working with the Electoral Commission and supporting the Electoral Commission and helping to build confidence is our hope that people can make a decision. Now, the game changer they say about Imo is that the incumbent wants to ensure that he, by every means possible, so he has talked to the police, he has talked to the army brigade in Owerri, the police commissioner, all of that. You see, it might just be one point or spark that will engulf the country.
Mm-hmm.
If Nigerians do not get a reflection of their votes, then the country is in trouble. And where primaries are conducted, whether it is in Imo, that is a shame, or in any other part of the country, you are going to see a major crisis.
I was speaking somewhere recently and I said, if the Nigerian elite, if we do not do something to make sure that there is justice, and electoral justice is a critical part of overall justice, if the Nigerian elite do not do something to make sure that there is justice and fair play, and to be seen that there is justice and fair play in governance, in the administration of criminal justice, and so on and so forth, then the revenge of the poor is right at the corner.
It is right at the corner, and we can quote First Lady Aisha Buhari, who also watched the primaries in Adamawa State, and who came out with very scathing remarks about the process. When you look at all of it, in PDP, it was the same problem of primaries being conducted in several places with the challenges. With APC, it was the same thing, that you have primaries being conducted without regard for process. Why do you ask people to go and buy forms? And the forms were not selling cheap. They were selling running into tens of millions.
By the way, also Delta had some kind of crooked primaries.
Delta had the PDP Congress primaries in Delta. You could see gunshots, you could see violence.
Now,
in some parts of Abia, this was the
APC primaries in Delta too.
So this is not democracy. But those are internal issues of the parties. Nigerians have a right to come out and vote on February 16th.
For who they want, for what party they want.
For who they want. And if they come out to vote, our concern is that INEC should ensure that the processes that we have seen improve are further improved for the elections in 2019. Because if they don't, it could spell a major damnation for democracy.
If the titans, as it were, the APC, the PDP, if Nigerians watch the manner in which they are running even their internal affairs as political parties, is it not possible for Nigerians to decide to vote for some of the what is so-called minor parties of today, and let some of the minor parties today begin to emerge as more powerful political platforms?
I think it takes a while to build political parties, and that's part of the shame of the Nigerian electoral process. Today we have almost 90-something political parties. You can't build democracy on splintering of political parties. When you have 90+ political parties, it means that people are not prepared to patiently work to build, and everybody wants to create their own platform.
So that they can be presidential candidates
so
for
they
their
can
own.
be candidates for whatever position it is. It takes a while to build parties, and when we look at advanced democracies, we saw the evolution of parties and how they have strengthened over the years. Some parties even disappeared and evolved, and new ones evolved. In Nigeria, 90 political parties, you have to have the resources, and I'm not talking of money alone. The most important thing in building political parties is people, membership.
Yes.
If these new parties are coming up and running for elections. Let me hope that what they are doing, a lot of them is just making a statement. But if it is really that they are genuinely positioning to capture power, then I think they need to do a lot to build membership from every single ward. Those memberships must be the structures from the remotest villages. Some of these parties are not known beyond social media. They're not known beyond the major cities. If I go to my little village in Imo State, will I find the flag of some of these parties that are prominent in the social media? The answer is likely to be no.
And somebody said the social media does not vote.
The social media does not vote. Indeed, unless a lot of people who dwell in social media decide on election day to put aside
social media and go and vote,
their Android phones and iPads and tablets and go and queue, you would still have the problem that several people would be voting only in the social media rather than casting a vote in the ballot boxes. And that's not good.
Talking about being with the social media, how far are we from a time when people can actually vote with their Android phones?
I don't know too many countries where this is the case, and we have to be very cautious. And I'm not involved with the election management body to be able to make that, or even with the legislative process to know that well enough. But if we look at what are the accusations in the U.S. about interference, even by foreign countries, in the electoral platforms of countries, then it's something that we should be very careful with very good caution.
So, with all that we have said now, what is the hope for 2019 general elections? When we look at the antecedents, when we look at the primaries, when we look at the Ekiti and Osho elections, and we look at the primaries, what do we expect from what is on the ground? What do we expect to see in 2019 with regard to the conduct of the elections, the conduct of INEC, but also the conduct of political parties, and security, for example?
I think there's a lot of desperation, and I don't know why, because the economy is in a very bad shape. A lot of people who are running and spending incredible amounts to win election need to know how to create wealth. If it's on the existing wealth that we see, we can see that the economics of the country is in a very sad state, and whoever is coming in needs to prepare to work to expand revenues rather than take from what is. But, you know, there's a lot of desperation. People are desperate to get in, maybe because the economy has collapsed and people think that this is
that's the politics. That's the only business available now.
But again, the population is angry. In that desperation, and you know, I would say that the primaries we saw in 2018 ahead of the 2019 elections is the worst I have ever seen in this country. It's the worst. The levels of violence, the amounts of monies spent, the levels of abuse, the levels of use of state resources is incredible. And it doesn't, for me, bode very well looking towards 2019. But the challenge for me is the Electoral Commission, for us to continue to support
the Electoral
Commission to deliver. And I think the expectations on the Electoral Commission needs to be held high by Nigerians. Because when I look at the police, for instance, I saw some report about a primaries going on, and one of the political parties, a party official who was sent to conduct a primary, said he arrived in the state and he took the sensitive materials and deposited with the Commissioner of Police. What is the business of the police with political party primaries? There should have been specific instructions from the leadership of the police to say that
you don't beyond, interfere with that.
Yes, beyond getting providing general security,
you have no business.
You have no business receiving sensitive materials from a political party. 90 political parties. How many will you receive sensitive materials from? And why would you receive from one and not from the other?
From the others.
So for me, the security services are going to be key for the 2019
are
elections.
The security services, the security agencies and individual agents, to what extent are they really aware of the role they need to play and to be neutral if society is going to be at peace?
Like I said, Osun Ekiti, Osun in the first runoff, in the first election, not the runoff, Ekiti, I was very impressed by the police. In the runoff, I panicked about the role of the police, because when you look at what happened in the runoff and you think this could replicate in the general elections, then the country is doomed.
Well, we pray that somehow between now and the time of that general election in 2019, we pray that the security services, the security agents, individual agents and agencies, and INEC, and all those involved, and the government itself, that we will all know what we risk. The kind of risks that we face, the uprising that can come if any of them is seen not to be neutral.
I don't think they should underestimate the reaction to people, a people whose will is subverted.
Don't estimate the reactions of a people whose will is subverted. So it is in our enlightened self-interest to ensure that the elections are fair and free and fair, and seen to be free and fair by everyone. On that note, Clem, we'll bring this session to an end. We'll have another to discuss further on this very critical question. It's wonderful having you.
Thank you
very much.
As a Pan-Africanist, nothing has pained me more than this idea of that the North is educationally backward. Because for me, it goes to the core of racism, that black people are accepting, I'm stupid, yes, I am stupid, lower the mark for me. That's basically what the
so that's what you mean by lack of a sense of shame.
Exactly. How can we as Africans accept that a group of us in a part of Nigeria are saying, yes, we're stupid, yes, we cannot learn, so as a result of that, lower the cutoff mark so that I can pass. This is something that we as a country really needs to say. This is unacceptable. We need to be able to say, no, there is nothing wrong with the intellect of a northerner. There's nothing wrong with the learning ability of a child in northern Nigeria. What is missing, that they don't have the support that they need. And as a country, we should be able to say, no, as black people, we're not going to accept that there's a part of this country that says, I am stupid, I cannot learn.
Those who have money, or even the very average person, he tries every penny he has, sells his property, and he now says, okay, they've killed the universities here. A-levels aren't even good here. You send your children abroad. You are running a risk.
Seriously.
You are bringing up, children are being raised in an environment that's not your own cultural environment. So they are going to imbibe funny values.
And come back and you don't recognize your own children.
Exactly. Then what investment have you made for your old age? They are out there in that country. And when they see the goodies out there, many of them, they become so skewed, they don't even want to come back. So you are going to have another generation of
Nigerians who cannot relate with Nigeria.
Then successful parents, in quotes, their children have done well academically, and they are going to be left to live their old age in misery and loneliness.
You run a system where only the children of the rich get well educated. We are shooting ourselves in the feet, because the educated and this elite are maybe about 5% of the population, which means 95% of the children are there. Mm-hmm. And among these 95%, probably there are the 50% of our geniuses and brilliant people
that we have neglected.
We have completely neglected them. Mm-hmm. Among the 5% children of the rich people, more than half of them will be useless anyway, because they have not learned to be trained.
Yes.
At the end of the day, the whole society has lost.
Yes.
But if we made effort to expose the children of the poor to a minimum of education, among them were people who will
transform society
and solve the problems that we are all talking about. The problems which they have seen, and the problems which the children of the present rich people are not seeing. It's
unfair and unrealistic to expect our crushed mothers, our unemployed and pauperized brothers and sisters who have no job for 5-6 years of school to be the ones who have the idealism to vote out bad leaders. It can't happen. You need a change of demographics. It's the middle class people like us who have some degree of safety, some degree of convenience, and we can think about the problems. Look, why I can say no for now, for the purpose of tomorrow, is like an investor. You can invest more money instead of eating the money you invested. But people who are at necessitous, people who are at ground zero,
from hand to mouth,
are not capable of that level of strategic behavior of saying, we are not going to take this bag of rice. We're not going to take this 2,000
because they actually need the bag of rice for
right
tomorrow,
now.
for today.
Exactly.
People are now looking back and say, no, if I have gold in my backyard, why must it be a cadastral office in Abuja that decides whether anybody can mine it? Yes. And there's some sense in it.
Yeah, of course.
Allow the states.
You don't use the faith identity as a reason to tolerate injustice by a member of your own faith against others.
I have once again with me in the studio Mr. Clement Nwankwo, renowned lawyer, human rights activist, pro-democracy activist. This country will not be where it is now, but for people like Clement Nwankwo, but we still have a long way to go. I don't think this is the country that you dreamt of having. I mean, you have worked very hard, but you have not finished your work. Clement Nwankwo is the chairman of the Situation Room for elections, right, in this country, and has chaired the civil society monitoring of elections in this country for many years. And in recent times, he has chaired the monitoring room over the monitoring of the Osun elections, Ekiti elections, and they have been observing with keen interest the primaries that have taken place in recent times, and as we prepare for the 2019 elections. Clem, you're welcome once again to the studio.
Thank you, Father.
It's always wonderful to have you, and this time I would begin by reading a text of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 29, we read verse 2. When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people groan. And verse 4. By justice a king gives stability to the land, but one who makes heavy exactions ruins the land. Clem, let's begin from there. We are talking about a society runs well when leadership is a leadership that works with justice and fair play. When the wicked rule, what the Bible calls the wicked, people who are corrupt, people who are unfair, people who are unjust, all together, wickedness summarizes all that as far as biblical language is concerned. What prospects for change do we have in this country? You have been involved since the 80s about change in the governance of Nigeria, from change from military to democracy, and now we are running democracy of some sort, but it is not El Dorado. In the evolution of politics in this country, when can we think of possibility of having real change, where we can have government of the people, by the people, for the people? Right now, as we prepare for 2019 elections, it appears to me that we are running a government of those who have tons of money, by those who have tons of money, for the poor who have no money. I mean, the fact that every 4 years we gather all these poor people running around big politicians, but they get next to nothing in terms of health care, in terms of education, in terms of social facilities, social welfare. They get next to nothing. Their lot keeps worsening. But those who have been in power, either as local government chairman, House of Rep, Senate, governor, president, and ministers, those who have been in power are millionaires. And they live well. But the people whom they were supposed to serve, their lot is 10 times worse between the time they get in and the time they come out. And it's progressively worse. When are we going to really have change so that we run the government of the people, for the people? My own fear, actually, and in recent times I have expressed that very openly, my fear is that if there's no real change in the conduct of governance, if there's no real change in the management of our economy, if there's no real change in the administration of justice, particularly administration of criminal justice in this country, where there appears to be different strokes for the rich and for the poor, where rich thieves often go free and poor thieves pay for it in prison. If there is no real change and reform in all these areas, I see the revenge of the poor at the end of the corner. I see the revenge of the poor coming. And it will be sparked up by some maybe apparently insignificant event somewhere that escalates and engulfs the whole country. None of us prays for it. But how can we have real change? I'm not expecting that real change from what we have seen. I'm not expecting the 2019 elections. But how can we see real change in 2023, in 2027? How can we see real change come to this country? Or are we going to continue like this? Clem.
Thank you, Father. You read the Proverbs. The Proverbs and the Ecclesiastics are some of the deepest books in the Bible, because it deals with the reality of
human
life,
condition. Yes.
Human condition. And it tells you how all of life at the end of the day is empty, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to be the greatest. There's always going to be something.
Yes.
And there's nothing that has happened today that hasn't happened before.
There is time for everything.
There is time for everything. So when I read those two books of the Bible, it's deep reflection for me, and I'm sure a lot of Christians who read the Bible have those same reaction. You mentioned government of the people, by the people, and for the people, and that's democracy. Government of the wealthy, by the wealthy, for the wealthy is what we are practicing in Nigeria. And so the politics, the government of exclusion is deep-rooted.
Exclusion. Yeah.
The government of impoverishing citizens, the government of wickedness to people. I have seen this country from a certain height. I have seen the degeneration
over the years.
A few days ago, I went into a market here in Abuja, and I saw about 70% of the shops closed down. These were shops that were hitherto thriving and occupied. As we speak, in 2018, these shops are closed. And it is not because the people in those shops do not have the energy. It is simply because the wickedness of government policies is incredibly crippling. In the past, you could go to a government department and you would have people, contractors, asking to supply A4 papers, asking to supply files, and they got it. They didn't need to know the minister. They didn't need to know anybody. Today, those contracts exist, but the ministers, the directors, the officials have cornered all of those contracts for themselves. So the things that used to give industry, used to give wealth to people, even as small as it is crippling. The government said, and I was listening to the vice president saying that 1.something trillion have been given to the poor. I have no understanding whether the government does not understand the meaning of creating a conducive environment for business to thrive. If you give a man 10,000 naira, 20,000 naira,
you have not created wealth for him.
You have created no wealth. If you give it in your own mistaken understanding that once he gets the 20,000, he's going to be starting a business, then you have no understanding of economics and reality of life in Nigeria today. Because the man you are giving 20,000 has not seen 20,000 in almost a year in one bulk, more than a year. He is suffering from all manners of illnesses. He probably does not have clothes to wear. His children are not in school. He has absolutely no reason to use that 20 million to start a business.
20,000.
He is going 20,000. Yes, he's going to use that money to
solve the immediate problems.
The backlog of problems that have almost sent him to the grave. So I see government throwing money down the drain and gloating over what it says it is doing,
rather than create
poverty.
The environment, the policy regimes, the infrastructure that you need for the individuals to thrive. I mean, the people are not asking for handouts. They want to work.
People have a lot of energy. Nigerians are energetic. Nigerians are creative. We have some of the most creative people in the world.
Sure.
And people are saying, create the conducive environment. They're not asking to be given plane tickets to fly planes. They're asking for you to do the roads. They're not asking for you to give them land. They're saying, make it possible so that they can get land, so that they can farm. A person is farming, he farms right into the middle of the season. The next thing, cows come and eat up his crops. And you sit down and you allow this to happen. So people are being impoverished.
So many farmers in the middle belt now are resigning from farming.
Nobody is going into serious farming in the thick of insecurity, and even in the thick of, and you know, you go to Kenya, Nairobi, you would not dare find even a goat on the streets, even a chicken. Here you would see cows
at the International Conference Center.
At the International Conference Center, entering the Federal Secretariat, entering the Villa gates. And this government thinks that this is the way that you can eliminate poverty in Nigeria, by not having an organized society, and you give out people handouts to people, 20,000, 30,000, even 100,000. You go and you solve your backlog of problems, come back to the poverty, and begin to look for the next money to deal with it. It's not an investment money, and this government needs to understand that what it is doing is not eliminating investment.
You and I
poverty.
You and I are agreed that this is not the country of our dream.
This is not Nigeria of our dream.
This is not the country we worked hard during the military to see military go so that we may have a country worth the name Nigeria.
No, it is not.
Now, from what we are seeing, and in our previous discussion we talked about the recent elections, recent primaries. They are not indications of a real change come 2019. So I'm now saying, perhaps it has been unrealistic of us to be expecting change every 4 years. Can we start a program? What kind of program can we put in place for change in 8 or 12 years? Because I don't see any fundamental change, either by the party in power or another party taking over, that will happen in the next 1 year. I'm not seeing any, there's nothing in the works to indicate that. So what program, if we're not to give up on Nigeria, and we won't give up on our country since we don't have another country, what programs can we put in place? What measures can civil society, those of us in the civil society, we are not government, so what measures can we put in place to develop a critical mass of Nigerians that can understand what democratic culture is and begin to cultivate that democratic culture, that can understand what real economic development of a country, of a society is, and can begin to put together this, so that maybe in 8 years, maybe in 12 years, maybe in 16 years, we can see some change down the road. Because we have been, as you say, progressively degenerating. Can we begin to dream new dreams, but this time to be more realistic in our dreams? To be more realistic, not just to think that with another election then everything will change. I think we have repeatedly had our hopes dashed and our dreams collapse on that basis. So can we begin another kind of dream for Nigeria?
Yes, I think we can only have the same dream, which is a dream of development, a dream of a better Nigeria. To practicalize this means we must ask ourselves the question, what should be the next steps to take? Given that, well, we had fought, we had said military rule was the problem of Nigeria, we had fought, brought it to an end. The civilians who took over are no better than the soldiers who were there before them. The challenge is you have a citizenry, you have a population that needs to be educated, empowered to defend their votes. Because if people know that election is not about getting into office, stealing public funds, and putting it back into rigging the next elections, if people know that, if citizens can challenge that, if citizens can begin to hold the election management body to account, demand accountability from those who are charged with the responsibility of elections, defend their votes. And we say to people, when you cast your votes, you don't need to leave the polling units, you have to follow the process. We've said to political parties, you cannot seriously be running for elections if you do not have polling agents in every unit of the elections, right from the point where sensitive materials are leaving the holding place to the distribution of it, and then to actual polling, casting of votes, collation and announcement of results. If you don't have polling agents well trained, well trusted to represent you, then you are not running an election. And that's where I have my quarrel with 90 political parties. People who feel they can contribute into their best into the politics need to go into the established political parties and wrestle for power. You cannot, as a lone individual.
Well, the reaction of a number of people who I believe are good-willed and want is that these political parties, people are so entrenched in their tradition, in their culture of corruption and money politics, that is so difficult for people from outside to get in. Like we are saying, we have a culture of state capture in the established groups, and some persons who are committed to the common good and have not stolen plenty of money. How is he going to get in? How is she going to get in and play a leadership role in those parties?
Those good people need to aggregate themselves.
Aggregate, okay.
Because if you go as one lone good individual into a party, you will just be as wrestled out as the rest. So if there are enough people who feel that they have the goodness of heart, the goodness of purpose, and nature of goodness to make a change, they should aggregate themselves and go into the major political parties and wrestle for power.
So what you are suggesting is that if these camera guys, if any of them wants to go into politics and he can mobilize 500,000 people and decides to say, look, my youth group, we have mobilized 500,000 voters and members, and we want to join your party, but what's in it for us?
Those are the negotiations to happen. You shouldn't go and set up a camera people's party. You should get into the existing parties and squabble for power. You don't even need anybody's permission to get into a political party. That's the good thing about political parties. You decide you want to join. If I decide I want to join a political party today, I go in. If I decide that I want to create a group to go in and take over a political party, it's a numbers question at the end of the day.
Yes.
And it's a gradual process. You don't wake up in the middle of an election to say that you want to be candidate for an election when you had 4 years before. So I think it's something that the attitude of trying to be the 90th political party, the 91st political party, is something that we need to squash right away. Because what is happening is that the ruling party, the established parties, are in fact encouraging a splintering.
And they are laughing.
They are laughing because you go to an election, some party called whatever it is called gets 5 votes, and the others are getting hundreds of thousands of votes in an election. So what's the point? Did you create a party just to bear the title candidate for an election, or were you seriously running for elections? I see some of the candidates who have emerged saying they're running for president, announcing their decision a few days to the closure of nominations. You can't be serious. If you feel strongly, find people of like mind, get into the party that has structures, that's a Nigerian language, in the area where you want to run, and squabble for power, and do that early enough, not in the 9th hour, on the
early
11th
enough,
hour.
like immediately after the present exercise ends, you begin.
Exactly. For 2023, you should already be joining a party now and begin to move, rather than waiting and hoping that you would become famous on social media simply because you are a presidential candidate.
How do we get, talking about social media, how do we get young Nigerians to move from social media theorizing to actually join political parties? In this country, in the last 1 year, there's been a lot of campaign and mobilization of people to get permanent voters cards. But beyond getting permanent voters cards, you get all the cards. If 50 million of us get permanent voters card, that doesn't mean we'll get our candidate in. It is joining political parties so that we have a say in who emerges.
Or building a common purpose. You see, as we move towards, the good thing with the 2019 elections is that there's sufficient time for us to know who the candidates truly are. Whether it is any of the parties that are contesting for president or governor or whatever it is, social media can interrogate these candidates, share information on what they know about the candidates, and help to aggregate public opinion on who to vote for. And on voting day, the only reason you are holding your Android phone, your iPhone, your tablets or iPads is because you are capturing evidence of what is going on in the vicinity of the polling unit.
Yeah, but
that's where you should be.
Yeah, but I am saying that by then it's too late to decide on putting quality persons. I'm saying that what can we do now, along the line we were discussing before, to ensure that Nigerians, not those who have made plenty of money in the past through I don't know what means, but that credible Nigerians of our choice that we can promote. I'm talking of the generality of citizens having a say by joining political parties as members of the political parties so that they can actually promote candidates in the primaries, not just sit down and analyze. If they bring two people who I can't even vote for any of the two anyway. I mean, if they bring two people that are not credible as far as I'm concerned, then even though I have a PVC, I really wonder why I should go out to vote between one rogue and another.
Father, there's what you call lesser devil, lesser evil.
I don't want any devil. That's my problem. Yes. I don't even want any devil, and you are talking of lesser devil.
Yes, but I'm a practical person as well, and I know that my condition would be better off with one devil who is less a devil than the other who is more of a devil. So I think it's sometimes a choice that where you have two options, and you are, it may be the Hobbesian choice or the no choice, but the reality is that you have to make a choice. And the reason you are making a choice is sometimes, I keep citing the Italian politics. In the 70s and 80s, governments were falling in Italy sometimes every week. A prime minister is elected, the following week he falls. A new prime minister is elected. The one that was elected prime minister, that became the longest serving prime minister in the second half of the 20th century, was Berlusconi. And what is Berlusconi's history and record? He was seen as part of
the establishment,
as part of the exploitation of the masses. But he came in with a lot of reforms. He had his own challenges, and today, of course, he has legal issues. I don't know if that has been overtaken now. But he did remain as prime minister in Italy for more than
the longest serving,
exactly.
in the 20th century,
But he was a bad guy, maybe still a bad guy, but he responded to the development challenges
that is
and stability challenges of Italy.
What you are saying, Clem, is about involvement, as you said, choosing between the lesser devil and the bigger devil now, let's say 2019. But what plans, and if you can, we're running out of time.
We go beyond that. Yes, we go beyond that to empowerment of people, education of people, and then people who feel angry enough. And we need to have people feel angry enough about where we are to say we want to make a change, and we want to start in 2018 to look towards 2023, which means mobilize people, decide on which party of the major parties you want to go to. I don't
That's
want to
your
see,
recommendation.
Yeah, yes. I don't want to see the 91st political party. It's a waste of everybody's time. Let's go. Those who have created parties where they are just the only members or a few handful should decide that this is the party we want to take over. This is the party that has structures right down to the very bottom. When Obama wanted to run for president in the US, he didn't start creating a black people's party. He didn't start creating a young people's party. He went into an established political party. It took him several years. He built cells, he built clusters, he built support groups using the social media. And by the time he swooped on the Democratic Party, people were shocked. Where was he coming from?
It was a tsunami, as it were. On that note, we'll bring this segment of the program to an end. Clem is saying, I understand you saying that rather than set up the 91st political party, I mean, people who are disenchanted with the existing powerful political parties, all they think about is set up a new political party. Say, no, rather than set up a new political party with no structures, with only presence on social media and maybe Lagos and Abuja, that gather your people, network and mobilize a huge crowd of followers and carry those crowd of followers, carry them and join one of the existing political parties and take over that party.
Yeah.
That this is one way of ensuring that come 2023, come 2027, come 2031, that Nigeria can be a better place. On that note, we will end this program. Clem, wonderful having you once again.
Thank you
Thank you very much. Thank you.